Okay, um, I just did a quick review of what I've been doing the last 72 hours. Monitoring the confirmed liar and scumbag from Harvard. And I frankly am sad, shocked, not angry. I just don't understand. Again, if this is fake, then why is the lying scumbag from Harvard's name, picture, bio, and the whole routine on Harvard's website? And you know what he brags about on that website that you can check for yourself? Being a tutor. Being a tutor. A man that for any reason no one can come up with a reasonable explanation for because other people are being harmed. Therefore, I don't need to do anything anymore. You're not in your apartment sucking your own cock again because you saw me respond on Twitter to another inane misdirection. You lying scumbag from Harvard. I mean, you have no idea. I say this to you rhetorically all the time. You have no idea. Do you understand? I want to make something. I want to put something on the record. I don't care if anybody watches this. It means nothing to me. Okay? I am putting on the record my honest views. And if I'm wrong, I will post 3 videos explaining how I could have fucked up so bad. I'm happy to do it. I'm out of ideas how somebody could continue to claim, after fake apologies and appeals to join the enemy of reason and science and the golden rule, the only things that everybody indisputably knows immediately. I have a son. Do you know real... Toddlers understand this. That if they're nice, they get more candy. You lying scumbag from Harvard. And when their attempted fairness of exchange is lopsided in the way a 2-year-old can appreciate, in other words, 7 cookies for him and you get a half of a stale one from another bag, a 2-year-old, I mean, it might even be earlier than that. Obviously, I'm not a medical doctor, and I don't go around making substantiated claims because I'm not a lying scumbag from Harvard. All right? And I can discern in the universe any other any other agent, moving object, machine, whatever the fuck. If I can just identify that it's harming people, and then I can't identify the good that it's doing, it's a virus. It's a murderer that hasn't been caught. How could anybody incontrovertibly prove that no matter whatever Hunter Maats is doing, which the depth and breadth of human history, I say, would agree with, and he's teaching children. He's teaching children to respond to an honest inquiry with an oblique appeal to T.S. Eliot. That's the way you get along in the world? Somebody explain it to me. I don't understand, even when I invent scenario after scenario of this being total, it could still be total bullshit. Okay, obviously. There are obviously there's been conspiracies that have perpetrated frauds that have fooled a hell of a lot people a hell of a lot smarter than me. Jesus, Do I need to put that on the record? All I'm saying is, do you realize I am seeing tweets? In other words, he puts out a bold assertion that the whole universe knows couldn't possibly be proved, even if we all dedicated the rest of the duration of humanity to try to prove it, because there's as I keep explaining to the lying scumbag from Harvard, any unknown variable in any proposed idea that's let out of its cage must have, how could someone disagree with it, must have at least some component of it that is by definition in the model. And that calls into questions of logic about how could you ever measure. So let me explain this again, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Even if you become a billionaire, even if you become Donald Trump, okay? Let's say you, the lying scumbag from Harvard, okay, is an identical carbon copy of what people who actually can't make the determination seem to be less pernicious. I hope that makes sense. In other words, we're all sitting back. This is why when people suspend logic, bad shit happens. Here's a perfect example, okay? Hunter Maats I just said his name again. The lying scumbag from Harvard writes his next book, which for him is equivalent to a bowel movement, except less successful. I'm making myself laugh. Especially because you can self-publish. And again, mazel tov. But who can claim moral authority, even self-publishing, that's spreading lies and making boastful claims that I mean, there's got to be third graders, second graders, kids that are so much smarter than me, when they're in first grade, realize that can't work. What are you going to do with it after you claim to collect data? So here's the scenario. Let me draw a persuasive argument. Okay? True? Who the fuck knows? I'm not a lying scumbag from Harvard. How could I know what the future holds? Okay? I'm not one of those qualified astrologers. Lying scumbag from Harvard. I'm not a palm reader. Lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? I simply want to keep demonstrating. Here it is. Donald Trump is probably the most pernicious entity in the world. I mean, you could go with Putin, draw down your list of the top 10 most pernicious people in the world, or at least the pernicious. What I'm really saying is the pernicious meter in everybody's head is that a douchebag lying scumbag from Harvard couldn't possibly cause any harm when we already have an agent in the universe, okay, with so much data of his ability to harm, his ability to not make one substantiated claim. Find me one substantiated claim of our current president. It's 2017. It's that guy, what's his name? You know, the guy who claims to be a successful builder but isn't even in the top 25 in New York. I mean, if you want real estate expertise, this guy's worth billions and billions of dollars. So why, if you're going to do that, why didn't you make your own decision and find somebody who's successful at it? Not somebody who says they're successful at it. You lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? So here's the scenario, and I want to hear I want somebody to come back and prove to me how fucking stupid I am. And even though I spent hours today, constructing, a deductive reasoning tree, okay, about a particular thing that I had a particular view on based on my at least personal evidence, personal observation, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? So, so there I am today, just for shits and fucking giggles. I think to myself, hey, you got a Twitter feed and you play golf and you love to watch golf. I know how odd that sounds. Okay. And I kept seeing these flashes. You know how for example, you go on the New York Post. Now, the New York Post is a very interesting example of a paper that has a lot of sway and knows how to dance around lines so they don't get sued, but they say enough shit so people keep reading. You get the picture. The New York Post is surviving in a marketplace filled with, hungry sharks. Analogistically. So, here we are. I start thinking about the flash of a headline, which, again, the New York Post needs to hire the lying scumbag from Harvard. The bottom of the media barrel needs to hire the lying scumbag from Harvard. When I say needs to, I mean create more potential harm that anybody can prove to me that just understands that wanton destruction. It's hard to prove that wanton destruction ends up being a good idea. How the fuck are you going to ever persuade anybody of that? Would you ever be? Well, you would, because you're a lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? I mean, these are the moral dilemmas that endlessly accumulate against the lying scumbag from Harvard. So here we are. Here's the story. Apparently, Phil Mickelson is not going to the next tournament. I know all the details, but I don't want to bore anybody because it doesn't matter. You're starting to learn, lying scumbag from Harvard? Here's what I'm seeing. Phil Mickelson passing up opportunity at the U.S. Open to witness the graduation of his daughter. Now I ask you. Now, here's the key. I want to make abundantly clear that that's the only information I saw. In other words, why would anybody read a story about somebody who did the right thing, and if he didn't do the right thing, he would be somebody who would be loathsome, presumably, unless his daughter was the most confirmed evil person in the world, and there was some kind of arrangement that we don't know about. You understand? I get to ruminate on that, you lying scumbag from Harvard, because I am just probing the harm probability. But here's the thing. Because I understand logic, you lying scumbag from Harvard, no matter what I do, no matter $1 billion of the most honest, industrious, hardworking people that only want to do good in the world, in other words, people opposite the lying scumbag from Harvard. So that's the only Mickelson decides to do the... Mickelson's going to his daughter's graduation, even though, he could add to the history books. Now, off the top of my head, I think Mickelson's worth like $40 million bucks or $60 million bucks. Okay, and it's not about money. It just helps make my point that can't be the motivation. In other words, your own admission that this is a banal, mundane observation. Okay. How do I go? How did I come to that conclusion? You'd have to persuade me that a guy who's almost my age, who's let's say 48 or something, who I've been watching since '92 when he holed out at Arizona. I saw that live. It's one of the few holes in one that I saw live. He was still he was an amateur when he was a senior at ASU, and back then, just like today, the purse for PGA tournaments is 18% of the winner's take of the purse in a PGA tournament is 18%. Okay? Here's what I'm getting at. What's Phil Mickelson gonna get for not witnessing something that'll never happen again? Because it can't ever happen again. He could have 1,000 more kids, but it won't be her graduation. It's an unrepeatable event in a deterministic universe, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? So, you're telling me Phil Mickelson is going to go play a weekend of golf to try to win $2 million bucks just for the $2 million and the fucking glory? And he's got $60 million in the bank. He's been married when he won that tournament at ASU, which I think was '92, but it might have been a year or two earlier. I know he's a few. Anyway, he couldn't collect his 180 grand. That's what made this story interesting, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay, I'm relying on my own observation, which I can easily verify because it took place in this universe, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? So now, whoever put this out, and remember, it doesn't matter who put it out. I'm on social media. You're on social media. Your grandmother's on social media. I think I've made my point. You can't not see that. Okay? So you and me and humanity of the English-speaking world was subjected to a story about a guy that if he had made the opposite decision, it would have ended his career, even if he could somehow justify it, which would be a fucking horror story, or he'd come off as the greediest, most selfish, narcissistic asshole who ever lived, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Now the whole world can impugn with evidence that this guy would rather increase his fame that he's had since 1990. A guy who won a tournament as a senior in college when all his buddies and his golf team buddies were there. He aces in front of everybody. Okay, lying scumbag from Harvard. I know this because I saw it with my own eyes. Now, observation, everybody knows. Recollection, everybody knows, is as flawed, can be as flawed as a lying scumbag from Harvard. So what I'm saying is I can substantiate it. I know it's on video. I've seen it. Okay? So now I'm presented with having to judge the moral character of a guy who's been married for 25 years, who is dating the girl who was standing there with his golf buddies and every half-drunk guy from ASU, aces to win, can't collect 180 grand, 18% of $1 million. Do you know how much money? You wouldn't know how much money. I mean, presumably, you don't know anything else. So let me explain it to you. Let me explain my personal experience. When I watch somebody for 25 years, and I see things like his wife is by his side every fucking weekend for 25 years, I'm exaggerating. She was his girlfriend when he won 180 grand, when 180 grand bought more shit you can dream about, and he couldn't get the money, and he was a senior in college when you had fucking $400 for the next 3 months, and he doesn't get 180 grand. He only gets the glory. What does he do? What is he? Let's make another evidentiary claim, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? He goes on to win countless tournaments. He is now considered the best left-handed player that ever lived. Okay? Now, you want me to substantiate that claim, you lying scumbag from Harvard? You count up wins. That's how you go to evidence. And if you somehow have a suspicion, if you understand logic, if you can find, and you should be looking for it, if you could detect that somehow it's been recorded that he actually only won 4 green jackets and not 5, and you could then go on a journey of correcting the record. In other words, I can keep finding a million ways, however plausible or implausible, to dismiss why anybody would tell me this story. I don't know how many ways to say it. Okay? So, you're asking me to weigh the character. You're asking me to weigh on an unsourced, content-free headline. I won't even speculate on the content. I don't need to speculate on the content. It doesn't matter. If there was a story about that decision that was grandiose, I either wouldn't hear it if the press thought it would do harm because they are our moral guardian, even though everybody knows the one thing they can't be to be a free press is a moral guardian. Why don't you chew on that, you lying scumbag from Harvard? Okay? So now I'm confronted with having to, apparently, I'm having to confront it that because in the universe, even though I didn't want to read it, but I'm a golf fan, okay, so you go to the sports page, you're going to see it. Would my mom see it? I don't know. I'm just saying it was there. A headline suggesting that there's an interesting story here. How could there be an interesting story? And if it was interesting, would they broadcast it? Would I have seen it multiple times, even though I knew it was bullshit, a millisecond after they even brought up the subject? A guy goes to his... Here's how you describe that, whoever wrote that piece of shit, and then the fucking lying scumbags who spread it all over the world, because you know what? That's what the world needs. The press proving that somebody did the right thing. A guy said, you know what? I'm not going to work today. I'm going to see my graduate. You tell me, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Tell me if you've ever worked anywhere. And by the way, I'm going to get back to Starbucks. I mean, do you realize the grandness of the irony that it turns out that Starbucks was right and you were wrong? And I easily could have made that argument when you published your fucking book. And when I looked it up, I've been researching you for 30 hours of my free time and loving every minute of it. And then I find out you're the guy. I remember you. Okay? Because I'm not a lying scumbag from Harvard. I watch what people say. I watch what people claim. I watch for intellectual honesty, but I also watch for a content of character. something that I could say about somebody, which I can't say about the lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? But I can say about Phil Mickelson, because I saw it and I know it and it's easy. But I already know that at least the pursuit of all those ideas has to lead in a plausible explanation. Okay? Because there's no story to the original story. Man has bowel movement, wipes his ass. What's the story? The billionth time in the history of our 14 billion year old universe that somebody wiped his buttocks after going to the bathroom? Why is that anywhere? Please explain. Once you start doing that, you like scumbag from Harvard? I need water. Once you start doing that, it becomes amazingly the focus that it comes in, that your suspicions are confirmed, and it just appears. It's fascinating. Deductive reasoning. You know, I've been doing deductive reasoning for as long as I remember, and I didn't look it up till today because I knew what it meant. Lying scumbag from Harvard. You know why I knew what it meant, and I used it publicly and risked embarrassment? Because I think that unless somebody is a trained philosopher, I could convey my point, okay, and then he would just correct me, and the world would forgive me because I'm not a fucking philosopher. You see where I'm going, you lying scumbag from Harvard? So, excuse me. So I do my moral exercise, something that again is free from the sentient that I'm referring to. Just for shits and giggles, I said, you know what? Let me think about it. Let me think 8 straight hours, and I'm not joking. Well, it was more. It was closer to 12. No. Well, okay, I'm quibbling and I apologize. It's bragging. It should only have taken me 5 minutes if I was smarter and better at deductive reasoning, which I looked up today to confirm that you simply confirm that what's been confronted with you can't possibly be measured. And now you're off to the races comparing whatever that is to anything that can, and that always fails. So it's as easy to prove with logic. This isn't my opinion. I'm just giving my impressions, what I believe. So somebody says, I believe in God. But you say, do you believe in God? Yes. Why? And then they go on this evidentiary hunt, which isn't an evidentiary hunt, which they're going to soon realize. Well, you know. And I said, let me start it for you. You look around in the world, you're not religious, it's not your thing, but you kind of get people need that shit. You know, whatever. You want to be tolerant. I mean, everybody wants to be intolerant of only intolerance, because that's one thing that's proved to do harm all the fucking time, you lying scumbag from Harvard. You see what I did there? Once you can invalidate the efficacy for all time of what's being proposed, you can then take that, consider it an object in the real world, and throw real things at it, and then postulate how fucked up things could get. And guess what, lying scumbag from Harvard? Your little game here of poisoning the minds of the youth, and I'm going to talk about the death of Socrates. I've been to Athens twice. I saw well, I'll get there. Okay, I mean, I can now compare the lying scumbag from Harvard, his tactics. Again, this is a news story that I couldn't even locate. It doesn't matter. A news story. A news story is something that somehow got in front of your eyes that's in a language that purports to be news. The fuck does that mean? It means nothing. Okay, here's something to ruminate on, and I'm gonna give him credit, Matt Dillahunty. Okay, dictionaries are not filled with definitions. Dictionaries are filled with word usages. Anybody could do anything with any word, but he's got to explain what he's doing because nobody will know what the fuck he's talking about. Okay, is it coming into focus, lying scumbag from Harvard, that however seemingly innocuous a pernicious agent is, because by definition it can't be proved, it can't be measured what kind of harm it is. Your intentional poisoning, I'm referring to it as young minds. I don't know that those that he was tutoring were young. Here's another point. What the hell does that got to do with anything? How many people do you know, including yourself, that like to be next door neighbors to a guy who's teaching people to reject logic? And not even in the pursuit. Not even if he had an unguided pursuit, maybe somebody could persuade him, dude, no matter how innocuous this is, okay, we drop the price of the New York Times a penny, and jihadis good job. Jihadis measurably stop cutting off heads, and the Catholic Church, for example, stops claiming to have an authority over something they can't even explain. You get the picture, right? The point is, its immeasurability means if for the next 5,000 years you look like a human intelligence that's gone over the event horizon, okay? For the next, let's say the next 1,000 years, you look like Kurzweil's conception of the far side of the event horizon, okay? That's you. And everybody in the world acknowledges it. Here's what's key, and here's why appeals to authority are not what operate in science or any pursuit where they actually want to get an answer to anything. Absolutely anything you can think of. Okay? So you lying scumbag from Harvard, you release this thing, and you somehow persuade everybody that it's a good thing. That, you know what, the only cost of this is everybody's got to pay more for a New York Times. And I can substantiate with ironclad laws of causality that will trigger a number of events that will lead to the destruction of the philosophy of Islam, for example, or somehow cut the head off of it so they sit under trees like Buddhists, for starters, let's say. Okay? Let's say everybody on the goddamn earth, no matter what they throw at the lying scumbag from Harvard, they cannot get 1 inch closer to explaining how good he is, what he's doing. But because Hunter Maats doesn't know what he's doing, fuck. I think I said his name twice. Since the lying scumbag from Harvard doesn't know what he's doing, and that therefore the 1,000-year success streak that looks like the best lottery number picking machine that actually was created and worked to the satisfaction of people who were 1 billion times smarter than everybody I know, throwing everything they got at it, and they get nowhere. So eventually they're persuaded to say, look, I can't, I've done other stuff, etc. You get the picture. Everybody who knows how to knock down an argument in 1,000 different ways can't get anywhere. Now, what does that mean? Presuming it's been, the rabid dog has been released by a lying scumbag of Harvard. Now the whole world is under the impression that they're in the middle of a 1,000-year well-being parade, okay, and everybody knows it because there's evidence galore, right? The first article is, holy shit, he got it right. The next article is, wow, he fucking really got it right. And the next article is, so-and-so, a 30-year statistician with a PhD, which means nothing, unless he can prove the principles of what he's teaching. I think it's indicative. Somebody like a lying scumbag from Harvard wouldn't. I personally would. And I'd love to hear a refutation. So, a plausible refutation, lying scumbag from Harvard. Not because Rosa Parks sat at the back of the bus, which seems to be a rhetorical response to, let me just throw out a question that I can answer. Let's see, Washington died in 1799. I'm trying to get more mundane. The longest person who ever lived that's been documented. Oh, I just opened another one. I could explain for an hour how the oldest person who's ever lived is also the most credentialed person that ever lived. Her name is, forgive my pronunciation, Jean Calment. She's French. She died when she was 122. Her father owned an art shop, and when she was a little girl, she recalls seeing Van Gogh buy art supplies and described him as dirty and scruffy and weird and kind of muttering and kind of what we'd all think he might look like, considering his presumed diagnosis of depression and so on. I mean, the guy committed suicide and there wasn't medication, and he was an artist. I mean, if that isn't at least grounds, you lying scumbag from Harvard, to at least open an inquiry that what killed our beloved Van Gogh was that he didn't have Wellbutrin, something that you can get for 2 cents today. Hey, you know what? You know how we all can get, I don't take Wellbutrin. You know how we all can get Wellbutrin for 2 cents a day now? Should I pause? The scientific method. Every medication that comes out for anything, I'm gonna convey my understanding of it. Medicines come into our world we call Western medicine when it can be sufficiently demonstrated that whatever claim was made at the front end of this project demonstrated their prediction higher than the mean. Not higher than the last drug that cured cancer, flat feet, depression. In other words, they're not producing the suite of medications for high blood pressure, for example, is filled with medications that, quote, do the same thing. They lower high blood pressure, right? Here's the thing. Why in the world are they producing these different ones if they're all after the same thing? Well, sentient creatures who were given drugs where no one could claim to be certain how it could interact with every conceivable interaction of a human being. How could anybody go down that road? So their standard is always sugar pill. Because an average person knowing nothing, taking as directed, is going to be the sugar pill. Assuming, I'm not going to go down the sugar pill thing. You know where I'm going with this. Okay? So it proves efficacy over the mean over the mean. Great. That study was confirmed, presumably, was a double-blind study. In other words, in principle, nobody could have been able to cook the books. Did they fail? Did they cheat? Did they steal money? Did they tell you they invented cold fusion? Back in, what was that? Remember cold fusion? Those poor bastards. Everybody described them as poor bastards for going out publicly and said they had cheaply proved cold fusion. But you know what? Here's a character building story for a lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? They said, you know what? We're going to go back and test it because we're the kind of people who aren't lying scumbags from Harvard. And they came back, and guess what they said? Hey, world, we fucked up and we're sorry. And we've humiliated ourselves. And we want to demonstrate in the future that wasn't hubris, that was an honest man's attempt at improving the world. So, anyway, what's interesting about what I'm learning about moral philosophy, which I started paying attention to directly, let's say 7 years ago. Gee, maybe it coincides with Sam's first book, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Here I am demonstrating that the person you loathe, who has no opinions, helped me. So there's evidence that at least Sam Harris isn't the worst person in the world, because I can demonstrate at least once he did something nice. You see where I'm going with that, you lying scumbag from Harvard? I can't do that for you. That's what this whole exercise is. I mean, astonishing. Unless the whole thing is a troll, how could it be? I'm on here talking about you, trying to take you down as a lying scumbag from Harvard. That means some consumer of what I'm saying is either persuaded or not persuaded, and we can't tell what the outcomes of that, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Okay? So again, the beauty of deductive reasoning is simply making a successions of logic laws, adhering statements. As long as you don't say something illogical, you can keep going. For some reason, the lying scumbag from Harvard hasn't figured out that. And yet, postulate this, fine listeners. How did he get into Harvard? Where I am now speculating that now what I'm doing in response, even though I'm acknowledging over and over again that this could be all bullshit, somebody's listening to me and that can have an effect. Proving once again that when you don't know what you're talking about, you certainly can't claim you know what's going to happen. I mean, how hard is it to persuade anybody of that? Which I've done now for probably an hour straight. So, where was I? It doesn't matter. You know what? I'm never going to say where was I again. When I'm talking about the lying, I'm going to try when I'm talking about the lying scumbag from Harvard, because here's the beauty of deductive reasoning. As long as every step is justifiable, however mundane, you have a plausible argument. So it doesn't matter how and where I demonstrate that who is a liar and a scumbag from Harvard, of course, which I haven't yet discussed, but there are public communications with Harvard simply asking, do you have the power? I didn't even let me get to this. Once I saw that this person, I mean, just consider this. Let's say everything I say I got totally wrong. And he's the goodest guy in the world, and da. This isn't a sincerity contest, for goodness sakes. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi has a PhD in Islamic studies from Baghdad University. He's not uninformed. That's what makes it mundane, as Sam Harris has been pointing out for the last 12 fucking years. Jesus. Every time you try to think of something, you realize another way you could get harmed. And then you realize, well, why am I even bothering to think about it? Why don't I just do something about the harm? I can't go persuade, I don't think. I certainly wouldn't try. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to give up his cherished love of blood, children dying, being raped, justifiable child rape, irrefutable, justifiable child rape in certain circumstances. How many people have you ever met that willfully and openly disclose that they can't even see an ethical argument? They can't listen. This is Islam. The mere suggestion that what they are saying isn't true puts your life in danger, right? God, I feel like Christopher Hitchens. Love him so much. I met him too. I read all his... hold on. I didn't read all his shit. Okay. That is fucking a lot of stuff. But I've seen every public statement of his, I don't know, 5, 6, 10, 15 times. I can quote him verbatim as long as I'm jogged with what he's answering. And he never disappoints. And why is that? Because he's doing what I'm doing, except he is an extraordinarily capable public speaker who has a depth and breadth of knowledge, you lying scumbag from Harvard, who did all he could to warn the world that here it is, again. Everybody knows that there's a hungry tiger somewhere at the preschool. They don't want to admit it, but they hear it growling. They see its feces when they come back in the morning. They see hair, which gets tested by a DNA lab. I think you get the picture. But they can't find the fucking thing. Okay? Who cares that it's a tiger? They can't find it. They can't eliminate the probability of it eating children because they don't know how to kill it, because they don't know what it is, because they don't know where it is. You get the picture. Okay. So another example. Okay? So I'll probably switch analogies because I don't want to hesitate. But once you see with your own eyes that Harvard University's alumni website, which is on one of my videos, happy to give it to you. Obviously, I think my audience who's gone this far with me is capable of that. So I look, and it says Hunter Maats. Fuck, guys! I just said his name again. I'm putting a tip jar. I'm putting a curse jar over here that you're going to see me put money in, that I'll give to a homeless person or a soup kitchen or fucking whatever. I'll buy 3 of my friends a cup of coffee and thank them for allowing me to do it. Every time I say the lying scumbag from Harvard's name. Okay, so getting back to Harvard and the lying scumbag from Harvard. So I look on there and I see this bio. And there he is. And he's talking about that that even though he wrote this great book, And dude, here it is. He writes his own book, which has now incontrovertibly proven that everything he said in that book and up till now has been wrong. A self-refuting, decade-long fraud. And he's not out of business. And we're going to take out Islam? Do you realize all you have to do is ask anybody who ever, even at the mere suggestion that Islam is a net good in this world, however it's interpreted, okay? Because remember, Islam is a set of ideas. Muslims are people. I never met a Muslim I didn't like, presuming he was Muslim. What the fuck do I care? He's entitled to his beliefs so long as they, what did Ben Franklin say, neither pick my pocket nor break my nose. Okay, I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to do. But once you determine harm, now you're burdened with addressing that harm or suffering the consequences and having to explain why afterwards. Would you want that responsibility, you lying scumbag from Harvard? I just asked him a funny, stupid question, but this is his whole thesis. Okay, he gets that answer wrong. In other words, I can refute logic, which has been gaining credibility with the humans that have been on this planet since, let's say, Plato died and whatever he was, 364 BC, 354, around when Alexander was born, roughly. So, Alexander the Great, by the way. So, and Aristotle tutored Alexander, and that's actually a funny story. You know, when you tell almost anybody who knows nothing, but if you're engaged on about Greece, about history, about going to Rome, going to Turkey, going to India, going to anywhere in the Middle East, the Mediterranean, everybody knows about Alexander. I've read four or five biographies I could get my hands on, plus loads of other data, and gone to Greece twice, once by myself to go to 17 museums in 4 days. I could talk about that. That was a couple of months after September 11th. What a great trip. Stayed in the second best hotel in Athens, adjacent to the Hotel Britannia. It's at Syntagma Square. It's walking distance. You don't want to be there now, potentially. You might get shot or a bottle could hit you in the head. That's where everybody goes to complain about the government, the current government effectiveness in Greece now. So you've been warned. But anyway, so you talk to anything, you talk to anybody who's interested in anything that covers a third of our world, and you mention that, hey, did you know? You ever heard of Aristotle? Oh yeah, of course. What am I, an idiot? Yeah, that old fucking philosopher dude? Exactly. Did you know that guy tutored Alexander as a young boy into adulthood? I would characterize it as all but verified. It might be bullshit, because Alexander was larger than life, or at least he tried to portray himself as that, of course, and now has that reputation, of course. And he gets trained by the third philosopher of the founder of Western culture and all that it means. The cradle of civilization. Plato got so much shit wrong, it's embarrassing, I presume. I haven't read enough Plato. I just assume we've made progress in the last, 2,340 years. How could we not? I hope we have. I know we have. I'm being silly. The point is, shit, I referenced Plato instead of Aristotle. I'm sorry. Aristotle died a couple of years, actually. Aristotle outlived Alexander the Great, but Alexander the Great died like on his around his 32nd or 33rd year. Doesn't matter. I can locate the date. I can describe all of historians' impressions about all of that. When I say all of that, it's not even close to all of that. Those battles, I mean, when they go into Eastern Europe, you don't know what the hell they're talking about. You just go with it. You can't even attempt to pronounce the name, even though the name is actually simplified in a certain way, at least I would contend. And you still can't say it because it sounds like Eastern European language and so on. So, I mean, consider this. You have Aristotle, who I guess, at least from off the top of my head, was, geez, now I'm going to rate philosophers. I'm not rating philosophers, okay? No position to do that. But we're talking about one of the most famous people who ever lived. So easy, it's not even, you can just make that claim and know you could at least come in second place or third place or eighth place. And so this guy, Aristotle, who was, as I recall it, thanks to Socrates and Plato. So you have Socrates, who lived outside. He never washed. He had horribly dirty feet. And he would walk around Athens. I hope people have heard this. He would walk around Athens and he would simply go up to people and engage them. And he was a little odd, just like the flaky guy that walks up to you when you're walking the dog. But he's such a lovely, harmless guy that why wouldn't you talk to him? And you know why? And this is beauty. This is beauty, even if it never fucking happened, you lying scumbag from Harvard. Because we have the principles of what he did. Jesus Christ. Things don't need to be real in the world to be valuable. Now go off and spend the rest of your life defining real instead of understanding something for once in your motherfucking life, you lying scumbag from Harvard. So as I said, I went back to Socrates. So Socrates was, geez, I hope I don't screw this up. I'm doing it from memory. But I'm almost certain he was a veteran of the Peloponnesian War. Let's see if, yeah, that matches up. The Peloponnesian War was about, well, I know when it was from. It was over 30 years, and I think it ended in 431 BC, which was 32 years before he died, and he was about 60, in his 60s, because he was a veteran. So I'm trying to recall if he ever saw or could have seen Thucydides, who famously is referenced for all time with the fun saying, there was no Thucydides before Thucydides. Now what in the fuck does that mean? Very simple. Thucydides, for example, let's say 100 generations ago, went to, if a generation's about 25 or 30 years, let's call it 100 generations ago, a military veteran, which as I recall was accomplished, could be wrong, forgive me. I'm nearly certain he was an honorable dude and recorded, at least in the context of the military at that time, and recorded in some way, I can't, somehow we know it's granted because the numbers add up and the contents of what he was supposed to say all makes sense. And again, it doesn't matter if it's real. It's a beautiful story that actually is moral, unlike every one of every religion, of every unfounded claim that ever was. Okay? That's the difference. That's the difference, faith heads, liars, and scumbags. will never understand the beauty of Socrates. I mean, I'm stealing this from Hitch, so forgive me, Hitch. Or maybe this is an homage, Hitch, because I love you so much. And I'll describe, I said I met him. I didn't meet him. I stood right next to him. I didn't have the fucking balls to ask him a question about something I knew a lot about. I'll get there. Anyway, so where was I? I said I wasn't going to say that. So you have Thucydides, who was in the Peloponnesian War, which I could describe at length from memory, and I read Kagan's book. You could call him the leading authority, translation and so on. He lives in New Jersey, and he died a couple of years ago, and he's 90 years old. He was 90 years old, and he wrote a multi-volume history of the Peloponnesian War that I challenge anybody to read. And I will shake your hand, because I read the condensed version, which was, whatever, I mean, substantial. And it was great. But I have to describe the way it was great. And when you read it, you realize that what you have here is a historian that understands my impressions. I mean, the guy's got a sick reputation, right? That even if you're talking about getting sidetracked, so Socrates, accomplished, normal, known friends with people who were rich and famous citizens of Athens. People we know things for certain about, quote, certain, today that impact our world, conceivably today. In fact, every historian, I read a book, The Battle of Salamis, the battle that changed Western civilization. And if you never heard of that one, that's when the the Athenian navy, vastly outnumbered by Persian forces, who had in the past sacked Athens, which was obviously the seat of their theology, worship, and so on. A heinous act of barbarism and theocracy that might be considered, unimaginable today. Having everybody be a Catholic, having a huge part of people be Catholics and having to watch the wanton destruction. So Socrates comes back and he gets a little weird. And he starts living outside in the shade and has no interest to not. Because the billionaire down the street knows him, respects him as a leading member of the community, and as someone who was an honorable war veteran, as I recall it. Who aren't you going to respect for that? In the context of the day, in the minds of the people of the day, we're talking about a guy who presumably could have been granted deep respect based on at least his overt bona fides, and so on for being a citizen of Athens, which was worth a lot. If you want to hear about how many slaves outnumbered Athenian citizens, yeesh. Not a place you wanted to visit if shit wasn't going down well, because you were outnumbered like you can't believe. So anyway, so you have to envision someone who people the most influential people in their world, which was the world to them, turn into this flaky dude who's living outside and being and asking questions. Here's the weird thing. I mean, just picture everybody's reticence about saying, Jesus, motherfucking... What happened to Socrates? There was a guy who was at the top. Friends, accomplishment, education. I don't know if he had family. I gotta look that up. So, and now he's turning into this flake. But here's what happens. Just like the homeless guy you're initially scared of, or a guy you think is homeless that you're initially scared of, if you agree to engage with him, and he's a person who is credited with the Socratic method, tell me one thing you know. Oh, okay. How do you know that? And how do you know that? And how do you know that? And how do you know that? Training anybody who says anything anytime, forcing them to simply make, at least appear to make sense on whatever they claimed in the first place. And if you have to do that 10 times in a row, if you claim that you know there's an omniscient being that's always existed, that caused the Big Bang, that is the ultimate moral authority in the universe, that is all-knowing and all-powerful at the same time. You ever hear that joke, the refutation? How in the world can you be all-powerful and all-knowing? If we presuppose all-powerful, that means he has to. He can do whatever he wants. But if he's also all-knowing, you have to acknowledge that he can. There's never a need to change his mind. Therefore, you cannot do the same things. I mean, people, do you realize that a simple, literally 1 minute logical exercise, I mean, it could take 30 years, if you know, could simply disprove so much? All you got to do is ask the Pope or any other lying scumbag to substantiate any of the ludicrous claims he can't possibly substantiate. If he agrees to answer that question, he's in an infinite regress of how the fuck to explain it. And how are you going to come up with an initially illogical statement, which is refuted, 24, conceivably confuted, being able to be disputed for all time. Again, you get where I'm going with this, right? So, back to Socrates. Envision him farting around and being weird, but every time you talk to him, he becomes a little more charming. Why? Because he wants to talk to you, to listen to whatever you have to say. Okay? How many people do you know that hate the idea of having an engaged listener listen to them? How many people hate that? You get the picture. People get charming when they show genuine interest in other people. This is another thing the lying scumbag from Harvard has never been taught, was born this way, faking, I don't know. So of course, Socrates builds this reputation and ends up maintaining, I would assert, that his relationships with the brass. And you know what I mean. Athens was small, and you were a male, you were landowning, you knew who your great-great-great-great-great-father was. You get the picture. If you're a friend of those guys, how in the world is it a problem unless those guys are in danger, right? Well, here's how. Theocracy and people like the lying scumbag from Harvard, okay? So listen to this. You know, fast forward if you've heard this story, because here's the thing: it's scant on ironclad fact, but just the mere imagination that you apply to this brings joy. I don't fucking care if ancient Greece ever existed in this context. We now have been persuaded for 20, going on, what is it, 2,450 years or whatever, that what Socrates was all about, even if he didn't know what the fuck he was talking about, lying scumbag from Harvard, he created an enormous good by simply asking questions. And if you just ask why to any declarative statement that anybody says, they are on an endless mission to satisfy your skepticism. As I've said for the fucking 1,000th time, the 400th different way, you lying scumbag from Harvard. So, switching to the OJ, the water's not doing it. So, as I said, protected status for the flake who lives, under the car park. Excuse me. So, what happens? His reputation grows because he's charming. And guess what? Everybody he meets is not only charmed, they walk away realizing they just proved to themselves there's no good reason to tell anybody they believed anything because it's an open declaration that you're a fucking idiot. Okay? And I can define fucking idiot in this context, I think, for the next 1,000 years. Because all I have to do is raise the specter of harm with an unknown variable. Or an unproven variable. You get the picture. So, Socrates eventually accumulates followers. He doesn't have a school. Plato is the one who established the, what is it called? Lyceum? Lycee? I walked there. You can walk the path from the Acropolis, which has been worshipping, let's say, 3,000 years. That might be a push. Pre-Homeric. Homer wrote in what, 750 BC, 800 BC? They have no idea. Well, they have some idea. And he starts to accumulate this following. Uh-oh. Who's in this following? The youth of the people who run that fucking place. And although Socrates was pleasant, and they enjoyed talking to him and considered him a harmless old man who was just sillily asking questions, this supposedly harmless guy was accumulating the next generation of powerful people to question why the fuck in the world would anybody waste 1 minute contemplating if a Homeric myth was true. I mean, have you ever read the Iliad? Those gods, they're incarnate. So, you know, when Ajax is riding his chariot, or someone is riding his chariot, I can't remember which is which. The point is, the deity is by him, urging him on, telling him about his moral honor to go cut heads off for treasure and rape. So, again, we're back to moral lessons in a plausibly historical context, which, for the purposes of understanding and helping all of us in the real world, doesn't matter. Now, why do I keep saying that? Why do I keep indicating that where this knowledge comes from is irrelevant and everybody knows it? I need to qualify that. So here you go. You got this ultra liberal telling them to use their own minds, have a moral character, obey the golden rule. And, my God, I haven't even said his most famous quote. The only thing he can be sure of is that he's sure he doesn't know shit. How the fuck could anybody know shit in this universe? We're not at the event horizon. The event horizon wasn't 1,000 years ago. Ray Kurzweil out at Google here and MIT. So I've looked into him a lot too. He's a very interesting guy. Very interesting ideas, and even if they're just mental masturbation exercises, it's great shit. So, you know what happens? The juniors in high school go home and their parents start overhearing them talk some pretty weird shit. Okay? Not the usual, pay deference to the gods and just pretend, just like everybody else in their religion today. Yes, I am impugning that. If there are illogical claims that the person sitting there knows what isn't true, he knows it's faith. What do you think faith is? I believe this and I have no good reason. Okay? Who in the world? I mean, the Christian dogma has been trying to prove that. The astonishments go on, and they're interesting to talk about, and they're instructive. But here's the problem: it's fucking shit up. It's fucking shit up all the time, everywhere, to everybody, and it has been since the motherfucking beginning of time, right? So, well, our species anyway. Don't get me started. So the parents, and I'll give you I'll just give you a current day example. So envision really conservative parents from the 1950s. Dad's fixing the car, mom's making the muffins with the what would I put in there? I'd do carrot and raisin. Sounds pretty good. So she's baking. They're thinking it's Joe Normal Day, and by accident, and she wasn't eavesdropping, because it's an honorable house, and respect was granted. Here's the problem: they learned to respect the wrong thing. The previous generation, Socrates wanted to teach the new thing, that listening to lies all your life long doesn't help you get anywhere, unless your goal is wanting to listen to lies, and then you'd have to justify that claim. So again, you see where I'm going here. So picture a 1950s Beaver Cleaver family, okay? But Beaver starts telling his brother there, what's his name? Something. And mom and dad over here, and it's something as pernicious, scary, evil, unnatural, worthy of our vilification, at least in private. Our snickering, our immediate deduction of their self-worth because of who they are. Who the fuck? Who would ever want to do that unless they had to? And then be honest when they do it. So, they overhear, imagine Cleaver's mom there, overhearing Beaver tell his brother that why in the world, Beef, why in the world Does the church say that homosexual behavior is an abomination, and that I've read the so-called Old and New Testament multiple times from multiple honest sources, and it's as plain as day that it's bullshit. Plain as day that it's bullshit. Okay? Anything you replace with a pile of bullshit at least has a chance of being better than that pile of bullshit. Okay? So the same way you can dismiss the same way you can dismiss every theological claim ever made, for example, Catholic Church. I've read the website. I should put that up. I should do a whole thing on the moral, and then I'll have a rhetorical conversation with any pope who ever lived. I won't rule in and out on whether they should have, because I can't gauge the universe with them not in it in the past, because I understand stuff. Lying scumbag from Harvard. So here we are. Eve's telling his brother that the idea of two men together who love each other, doing whatever they want out of my purview and being respectful to everybody else, how do I not view that as an increase of recognition, an obvious, open confirmation of love we see when we're walking down the street? And now I'm supposed to give up the fact that people can't express themselves honestly without feeling intimidated. Okay? And again, I'm putting it in the 1950s context. I'm not putting in today's context, because somebody could come back to me and claim I'm a bigot or some shit. Here's what I'm getting at. When you're surrounded by bigots, the honorable one looks like a bigot, right? Okay? That's why you need to learn something, unlike a lying scumbag from Harvard. So, here we go. She hears her 10th grade son going on a reductive reasoning mission to realize every way he could think about how this could impact his life returns a who gives a fuck. Why am I worrying about who gives a fuck? I'll tell you who's worrying about it. Dogma-pushing theocrats who fuck children. That's who does it. You lying scumbag from Harvard. So, the cat's out of the bag. Somebody, a 12-year-old, okay, made a logically persuasive argument that there's no reason to think that somebody who spends his time with the same sex as he is, excuse me, that wasn't funny. I'm sorry. It's getting late. What time is it? So, I mean, you're a 1950s ultra-conservative middle-class family, and every cliche that it implies, and you're over here, your 7th grade son, make a logical argument that puts every theological claim to bed for all mankind. Okay? What's going to happen to him? What's going to happen to the guy who postulated, the 10th grader who postulated, that the mere suggestion that two people I never met, never will meet, live in Alaska and will never leave, what they do with themselves when they agree and they're not harming any other people because they're in their own home, I have to weigh in morally on that? Why? Show me some fucking damage. And then you get the theology. that it'll corrupt the institution of marriage. Define institution, Catholic Church. That's your first start. You'll learn that you can't even do that because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, because everything you do is made up, and that's what makes it so pernicious. Because it's perfectly circular, perfectly evil. You know what the smartest motherfucking thing did these scumbags, scumbag Christians who made up this religion did? I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, here I go making a comparison. But think of the most loathsome character you can think, and it doesn't even compare. Doesn't even compare. So, here we are, with the 10th grader unfortunately letting it out of the bag that nobody in the world, for starters, has no reason to wish in their own mind for, I mean, if you quote, there's more than one quote, but what's it called? Eschatology, the study of the end of the world. What's the name of that last book that is filled with nothing but promises of horrors to come? Revelation. So, we're asked to believe by those pathetic, child-raping, to quote Hitch, hysterical virgins, to weigh in on the quality or lack thereof, or the current status of marriage. Even though every motherfucker who's making up this bullshit, and again, it's made up, you can't prove to me that it's not, so I have to assume it's made up, right? Am I Napoleon? No. Why don't you believe me? You don't have any evidence. So then why are you making a claim with no evidence and claiming it's true? So what happened? We come to a place where we have somebody who shouldn't be. Emperor has no clothes, right? Eventually this gets acknowledged because people have common sense and they have brothers and sisters and moms and dads and mailmen and orthopedic surgeons who are gay and don't give a fuck what I think, and good for them. Why the fuck would they give a fuck what I think? Aren't we entitled to our own quote-unquote religion and personal philosophy in this religion? Well, it includes that, as far as my definition goes, until he starts burning fucking buildings down like the lying scumbag from Harvard might do. So, excuse me. Point is, we've got a real problem with the lying scumbag from Harvard. I'm going to post more. I'm going to talk extemporaneously, see where that leads. Departing from the lying scumbag from Harvard. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. So, or maybe just pick a new unethical piece of shit. So I'm trying to get my energy back here. I'm at an hour and a half, and I made no preparation, at least before I start talking. So we have a big problem when Harvard University, on its own alumni website, has a guy claiming to be a tutor, and I can't get him to construct a logical sentence. And here's the bad news, people. When I respond to this guy and tell him what a lying scumbag from Harvard he is, guess what happens? One of his followers chimes in and likes or whatever anything he says. Do you want me to demonstrate to every human living being that that's a really, 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 I mean, does that not, you send out a text saying, why are you mentioning, what did he do? He called Gandhi and Rosa Parks. He made some ridiculous assertion about Gandhi and Rosa. It was really funny. I'll think of it. So, worse than a name. Here's the thing. It's not a name on the way out for the lying scumbag from Harvard. On the way... Yeah. So, he sends out a text that is leading at best, bigoted and actionable at worst. Actionable in principle. In other words, you can prove him wrong in a court of law. That's my take. If it were ever to happen, if it could. So we confirm that he has a degree. I don't even know that it's necessary. I want him to have a degree, right? If he's that much of a fraud, well, then he really will be marginalized. But here's the thing. Anybody who's claiming to be a tutor and badging the Harvard name to it, and a degreed graduate of that university on its alumni website, has to impugn the integrity of Harvard University, right? Why are they helping advertise for free somebody we've already proven, because he's admitted it every way I can count, that he's a lying scumbag from Harvard? Okay? Here's what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen. And you might laugh and be, this douchebag is tilting at windows. I'll talk about Cervantes too. At tilting at windows, tilting at windmills. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Let me tilt at windows. I want to do it. I want to do it because I can't see a way how this isn't harmful. And therefore, because he keeps engaging and proving once again, I'm burdened with putting out this fire. I really feel that way. Not to mention I love it and it's easy. And I can come on here and make endless observations about the lying scumbag from Harvard, and I don't see how he could even claim I was telling a lie. I'm indicating how he acts, and I'm indicating how the rational world acts with evidence. Why is that so hard? So, now, just imagine you're the president of Harvard University, who I tweeted the other night when I found this out. I guess it was Friday night. Of course she didn't see it. No one's going to read that fucking thing. If I get any response, here was my question. Dear Madam President, may I ask a question regarding the ethical behavior demanded by a graduated Harvard alumni? Does such a document exist? Which is a ridiculous question, because even when I was in college, they were filling that manual trying to prove how nobody thinks black people should be nobody thinks black people, white people, short people, tall people, Jewish people, Catholic people, atheists, fat people, blind people, people in a wheelchair. You see where I'm going with this? Endless documentation of what they won't allow. Smells already, doesn't it? That should be a pretty short list. So now, I've already discussed this with a successful attorney, a friend of mine, whose name I won't disclose. But can I now, without even, Harvard doesn't have a policy? That's an even worse situation. So they have a policy so my question to the president was, and I did it, but I'll never get an answer, presumably, is, ma'am, may I ask you if you are empowered to personally make a decision concerning a particular graduate from your university, even though you may not have been there. This is what I'm implicating. You may not have been there and so on. This is it's going to lead to an extraordinary easy question once anybody at Harvard identifies they don't want anything to do with a lying scumbag from Harvard. So I asked I said, ma'am, may I inquire if I am entitled to raise a concern about a public graduate of your university that over the last several months and reach outs, and do I need to go through it? I don't see anything but a clear violation of any ethics policy I would start to write. Ethics policy should probably be about a half a page long, maybe 3 lines. It tells you when you go to college and it's that thick, telling you how not bigoted they are. How do you think that's working out? Just ruminate on that. They're not doing anything. They're telling you they're doing something, which is worse than not doing anything, which I'm about to prove, because right now there isn't anybody at Harvard University who looks at the shit this guy does and would say, no, I'll stand with him. You know what? I'm the dean of the college he graduated from, and I can say nothing but good things about a guy who another initially disinterested guy seems to have showed that the minute he responds to a veiled threat, you're a bigot, you don't know biology. This guy's claiming people don't know biology. I mean, it's extraordinary. So how is this not? How in the world could anybody who claims to know anything about their own policy, which has prescriptions, the thing the lying scumbag from Harvard thinks he cares about, who can't ever make a prescription because he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. So how in the world could Harvard get out of this? We don't have an ethics policy. We don't give a shit. We've never heard of the golden rule. As far as we've concerned, we spent $1 billion looking into the golden rule because we're Harvard and we have hundreds of billions of dollars for some reason that never gets spent. And the golden rule turned out to be a ridiculous premise. Well, where's their evidence for that? Here's what I'm getting at. He's already in violation of any agreement he's ever made, to be honest. Right? So how in the world is anybody confronted at the hearing I hope to trigger to remove his diploma? So the lying scumbag from Harvard will no longer be the lying scumbag from Harvard. He will just be a lying, one of those, you ever heard of them? One of those lying scumbags. I mean, this guy will be proven to be because Harvard is going to take away their degree. How could they not take away? Just think about it. Imagine any scenario where somebody who only did once what I claim I have evidence for, did several times. Okay? How is Harvard going to vouch for him? What's the justification? He'd have to justify his claims, and the guy can't tie his shoelaces. He thinks making a threatening leading statement that somebody's a bigot because somebody had a conversation that he wasn't attending, that I guarantee you he never laughed about. I guarantee you he never heard that conversation. Okay? When Sam took down that comic, what's his name? Hannibal Buress, who's fucking funny as hell. And that is a moral quandary you're bringing up. I don't know if Sam, this is what he said, I don't know if Sam Harris is a bigot. I've said this already publicly. I don't know if Sam Harris, this is it, I don't know if Sam Harris is a bigot, but he sure didn't treat Hannibal Buress nice. I mean, if you listen to the podcast, you'll understand. And if you have a different interpretation, you'll hear from me. Sam Harris was dealing with somebody only slightly smarter than the lying scumbag from Harvard who happens to be funny as a motherfucker. I recommend it. So again, how in the world, assuming I could even... I'm calling Harvard on Monday, tomorrow. What the hell? I call up and I tell the truth. I started a YouTube channel with the goal of addressing these people who just crap all over everything. I happened upon a guy, incontrovertible evidence, over and over and over and over and over and over again. Okay? How is it? And proof. I haven't gotten, So Hunter Matt sends out that Buress tweet. You kick it back saying, gee, that wasn't a leading question that doesn't have an answer, which is why it was posed that way. So you get where I'm going. I return that tweet to sell him what he's doing is a grotesque act, and he comes back with something like, Sam Harris, listen to this, guys. See this? I swear on the principles of the Constitution of the Constitution of the United States. What did he say? He sends back that Sam... Oh, this is it. This is part of his central thesis. That facts in our universe... I haven't gotten to this in a while. Facts in our universe are somehow determined in reality by our feelings. Here's the lying scumbag from wherever's thesis. It doesn't matter if a fact is true or not. Right? Who cares? It's the utility that matters. That's all he cares about. He thinks he can measure utility, but he can't even make a... So, here we are with an incontrovertible, at least plausible action to bring and say, Harvard, is this your policy? Yes, it is. Would you consider that graduated alumni have, in reality, agreed to adhere to these ethical principles? Because to not would be to burn down Harvard University, right? I mean, it all makes sense. Here's the shit show, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm wrong. What in the world do they have? It's going to be hard to see them. They're going to make press taking away something that they were previously celebrating, obviously. So, the old story would be the guy is guilty as a motherfucker, but he'll get off, like OJ. Okay, I'd be satisfied with that. He had his day in court. Jesus, forget it. I mean, everybody knows he's guilty, and the guy is in jail on other charges. So, how could I... So Harvard says, we don't give a shit. In other words, it's at least a reviewable offense, multiple reviewable offense. Now they're confronted with the moral burden of having to make a shit show make a scumbag out of somebody they didn't think was a lying scumbag from Harvard. So how can they rule with that wouldn't be my advantage? Because any non-deliverable of the wanton destruction of the lying scumbag of Harvard somehow impugns something else, right? Something created the lying scumbag from Harvard. I'll just keep trying to find out until every person I can find won't have anything to do with them. So, I'm laughing and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and this is funny, but you have no idea how upset this makes me. The more I realize, the more I do my own research, the more the likelihood of this ending well is bad. And again, Sam Harris is a bigot. Back to him. You're a lowlife scumbag troll. He kicks back gibberish. Okay, and here's the gibberish, people. I'm going to light a cigarette for this. Some female identifying, and that's relevant, I'm going to explain, to me, because I'm not done with all the work. I get a couple of tweets in my feed. It was, messages. So I'm like, who the fuck is this? I'm not friends with this person. I reviewed who I'm following on Twitter. So it turns out that she was on either one of the Hunter Maats obfuscations, lies, and innuendo, and so on. What does she do and others? And I can prove this. I know I'm not showing it to you. Things like using a word, using a really harmful sounding word, attaching a harmless sounding word to it, so that it attracts attention, because this is the whole thesis of the lying scumbag from Harvard. It's not that hard to figure out, by the way. I mean, if I showed this to you and you couldn't, in 5 minutes, realize that, unless this guy's a robot, something's wrong, and if he is a robot, we need to turn it off. So, how in the world does he get out of this box? I'll call the president of Yale University and get his views on the matter. I will call and I'll drive up there. I mean, I've already declared that I'm prepared to drive up there and perhaps bring people with me for free to simply go ask a question. Let me ask you a question, ma'am. I appreciate your time. If I thought somebody that is going around saying they're from Harvard, and I really think that this person is a felon, and I'm afraid, how can you help me with that? If I could prove that he was a triple murderer, would you take his degree away? Questions like that. What are they going to do? They're not going to want to answer a question like that, and they're going to want to give me to somebody else. Somebody has to listen. Once you walk in the door and say good morning and aren't a lying scumbag from Harvard, why can't you just ask questions? They say no. And then you got to ask the question, why can't I ask a question about somebody you're advertising who's already proven to be a fraud? How do you explain that? How do you defend it? So back to the tweet I didn't recognize. So you get, I don't want to quote it directly, but you get something like genocidal biology. Okay. Now what the fuck does genocidal biology mean? I don't even know that you could make sense of that, and that's the point. It's marrying, how about, let me think of another one from the lying scumbag, for another one of the lying scumbag of I don't need to. You get the picture. So what do I get? Something that says something like I said, jihadi evidence. Jihad, I mean, it's just absurd. So you immediately realize that someone is saying something that's contradictory and there must be a reason. Here's where it gets interesting. There is no reason. There's nothing there. Now, if he was advertising, jihadi whatever, jihadi love, jihadi, contradictory things, fine. But he's not. And now I see evidence of his followers. I have a lot more evidence, but I'm loath to share it. I know that sounds leading, but with a few phone calls, I think I could, with permission. Show evidence after evidence after evidence, impugning the integrity of another person I'm not going to bring up now, who also is of highly questionable ethical character. And again, I don't need to read all his theses. Where the fuck are these bad ideas coming from? Somebody's got to know. So, round and round, round and round. Can't end good. Somebody is going to have to stand by him, and know who would. For what gain? How can you ever justify it? So I'm considering driving to Harvard if I don't get any feedback. I think it'd be fun. Go to the Boston Art Museum and so on. I don't think I've ever been to Harvard, actually. I'm not really impressed, I have to say. And I'm not jealous. I hope they're doing great things there. Fucking solving the world's problems. But on this matter, so just get a view of where I can take this. Find out what he's degreed in, and kindly call the chairman of the department and discuss what I couldn't be more sincere about. Just hear me out. I'm not a crackpot. Okay? I'll send you whatever you want. I'll talk to you for hours. Do whatever you want. Somebody's going to have to listen, or they're going to have to push me to somebody else. Go to the dean. Here's the other thing. Go to the dean of the philosophy department to discuss ethics and what he thinks of this idea. Go to the AI ethics professor. Ask him to weigh in on somebody doing this and what he thinks how great it is. Yale University, other organizations. I mean, this is an endless sinkhole. So, you're going to hear from me. And I'm not kidding. I am literally scared. Not scared to go talk to Harvard. Who the fuck cares? They tell me to go fuck myself. What do I care? Ask a question. But where does this lead? And how many lying scumbags from Harvard are there that are just like the lying scumbag from Harvard? Who is literally telling people to mix words together to make harmless and dangerous sound good, which might be an effective tool for spreading information worth having. But you click on it and there's nothing there. Or it's something that's so vacuous, you look at it and say, this is worse. This is worse. This is not worth looking at, just like the stupidest fucking piece of spam you've ever seen. Now, how am I supposed to interpret that? What am I not seeing? It's in English. So you see the picture here. How is that not harmful that somebody has been persuaded to go online and just yell shit And if I had her here and ask her, my God, imagine what she'd sound like. She'd need to be rescued and told again that whoever persuaded you to go around doing harm and then go around telling everybody what a great job you're doing, whoever persuaded you of that, we need to know who that was, and we need to stop it immediately, and here's why. I mean, it's literally cultish behavior. How is this not cultish behavior? I'd like to know. Okay? Because now I don't want to joke around anymore, at least for now. Just think, guys, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, think about what he's doing intentionally, and he's not being stopped. And he certainly wouldn't be stopped. He has stopped, and again, in my short experience with him, he's slowing down because he's tired of, I'm guessing here, tired of seeing my tweets to the chair of a half a dozen departments at Harvard, addressing other departments at Harvard. Who can I discuss? Somebody who's out harming people and saying he got it all from you, or at least in measure, to some degree. I'm going to leave it there. Just shy of 2 hours. This was for me. I hope if anybody ever listens to this, they enjoy it. But again, it's a joyful process for a difficult and unpleasant situation. And, this is a mountain on a molehill. Not, a mountain, you know what I mean. I mean, how in the world? I'm prepared to go the rest of my summer escalating this as far as I can. Okay, so let's say I come back and I've achieved absolutely nothing, short of getting the attention of a lying scumbag from Harvard. I don't know. This is the point. What happens next? Ed Kennedy goes and fucks himself the rest of his life. And meanwhile, there's a virus on the loose, and no one knows if it's great or it'll kill us all. Again, the logical questions lead to problems that are bigger than the problems we have now. And that's scary. And I thank you for listening. I'll finish on Socrates. I'll finish on Thucydides, the father of historians, who saw the pyramids almost 2,600 years ago. He saw the pyramids, 2,400 years ago he saw the pyramids, stood there and marveled at their antiquity. Pretty cool if you think about it. So 100 generations ago sat a veteran of the Peloponnesian War who ruminated on the antiquity of the pyramids and who built them and so on. Very, very, and of course you go to Egypt today and we all do the same thing. And we're still doing it, and it's 100 generations later. Awesome stuff. So you will be hearing from me, and I do appreciate your time. Sam's Bulldog signing out.